very large oil companies that are busy polluting our waters, and the telecoms companies. I mean, MTN has made more money in Nigeria than it ever thought it would make. Nigerians, we're very talkative lot, so so telecoms is very 167 million people that talk a lot. You can imagine, I mean, the bulk of the money made by telecoms companies doesn't come from text or data or providing bandwidth. No, it comes from talking. Hello.
Fair comment.
If you land in Lagos, you see a big billboard of telecoms company, and it says, hello. That tells you exactly where they make their money. And the rest was going to about 30% to capital markets, lending to stockbrokers, and then, of course, our friends, the oil marketers. And maybe this is the time, before you start throwing your eggs, maybe this is the time when I should say a little bit about why I got so obsessed with the subsidy regime. First of all, the term subsidy, and I'm sorry if I seem to put into Nigerians here, but I've read all the Facebook comments. And I know half of the people who are from Nigeria in this room are not happy with me. Okay, but the term subsidy was actually a misnomer for this arrangement. The Nigerian government was providing a hedge. A subsidy happens when you say, look, we'll pay 20% or 25% or 30% of the price. When you tell a country of 160 million people that no one will pay more than 65 naira per liter of fuel, irrespective of where the price of oil is, irrespective of where the exchange rate is, the government provided a hedge, and it had a naked position. There was absolutely no arrangement for any kind of tax and revenue measures in the event of rising oil prices. So you have an arrangement when oil price was $50 a barrel, when the exchange rate was 120 naira to the dollar, when the government was contributing maybe 10, 15, 20% of the cost of fuel. And it gets to a point where the government was paying more than the consumer. So you turn your car into the station, fill your tank, pay 65 naira per liter, and the government pays 75 naira. It's simply unsustainable. And how was this payment being made? Based on documents. So the government effectively said to fuel importers, if you can bring me documents that suggest that you brought in 10 million liters of fuel, I will pay you 7.5 billion naira. Now, in Nigeria, you produce those documents. Now, they said this for 2 years. And, everybody thought, I once had a formal letter from BPRA protesting against what they said were wild allegations I was making, but we've just seen it last week with the customs officer saying, well, what happens is because our ports aren't big enough, the ship actually goes to Cotonou. So you established an LSE for 30,000 metric tons. You didn't know the ship couldn't land in Nigeria. So it goes to Cotonou, and no controls. Nobody was there to see that the ship was actually emptied. Small vessels go in, bring in whatever they bring in. You come with documents saying you brought in 30,000 metric tons. I get subsidy based on that. Meanwhile, you sell half of the ship in Benin in the market at market price, and a quarter of what you bring in goes back across the border in tankers. And what you've seen last week says that last year we paid subsidy at the rate of 59 million liters of fuel daily. And before last week, the highest estimates we had of consumption was 35 million liters. And even that was 2 weeks old, because before then it was 24 million liters. So where was the 20 million liters go? on which we paid subsidy at the rate of 18 naira per litre. In 2011, we sold $8 billion to petroleum marketers for the purpose of importing fuel. We paid another $8 billion as subsidy, and 16 billion. That is 8% of Nigeria's GDP. And that was 100% of the total government revenues from the oil sector. Totally unsustainable. Now, I haven't yet come to that. It's just to encourage you to please keep your shoelaces tight. But what then happened with the banking industry was you had all these oil marketers that had borrowed a lot of money from the banks, and they had not paid. And the reason they didn't pay was that the fuel never came into the country, or only part of it came in. The rest was sold in neighboring countries, and the money, if you ask me, is probably in some real estate in Europe, in private jets, and in huge bank accounts elsewhere. And also brought down the banking system. So for me, this was what got me interested in that sector. I mean, the capital market was fine, just easy to understand. But how was it that this sector of petroleum marketing could take so much money, okay, and then the money simply literally disappeared? There was no fuel, there were no receivables. Where was the cash? And so it was a big fraud, and it was a major part of the problem. Now, but just we could blame the bankers for this. We had to ask a basic question: why were the banks not lending to the real sector? And having come from this money background, I knew that some of the challenges were beyond the banks. The Nigerian economy